Okay, let's take a look at how to install UiPath and begin our RPA journey. I'm here on the UiPath.com website, and there's a bunch of great information in these top menus you can look at. But to do the installation, I'll click on the Start Trial button. And if we scroll down on this page, you can see that they have a Get Enterprise Trial button and a Get Community Edition button. The Enterprise Trial is more for a large company that wants to do a POC, and this will give you access to the official enterprise installer and also access to their official tech support forum that's responded to directly by UiPath. Community Edition, if we scroll down and look at this chart, is for individual developers, enterprises with a couple asterisks, and legal entities. Notice it does give us up to 2 robots connecting to their Orchestrator CE platform, which is the server that allows you to schedule robots and aggregate results. In both cases, though, we will be able to play with the UiPath Studio, which is what we use to build robots, a version of Orchestrator, and usually for an enterprise, you would install Orchestrator locally on-prem, whereas with the Community Edition, you'll be interacting with their platform.uipath.com platform as a service. So I'll click Get Community Edition, and when I scroll down, it asks me to fill in some information. I'm using my own company email address here, and if for any reason you don't have one, it's fairly simple to create a custom domain and email addresses. I'll set my field of expertise to IT, job level, company name, country, industry, and finally LinkedIn profile. I'll click on these checkboxes and click on Request Community Edition. This page tells me I'll get an email that contains the download link, so let's go look for that. After a few minutes, I received the email, and it has this big download button, so I'll click on that. I'll save the installer in my D installers directory, but you can put it wherever you want. Click on Save. After it downloads, I'll click on Open Folder, and you don't probably have to, but I'm going to right-click and select Run as Administrator just to be safe. Agree to the User Account Control dialog. Click on the Run button. The installer opens, and you can see it's installing 2018.3. And the first thing we see is this dialog that allows us to activate. If I was an enterprise trial user, I would use this Activate License button. But since I'm installing Community Edition, I'll just click here. I'll use the same email address that I registered with, and notice I only have automatic activation for this Community Edition. If I was using the enterprise trial and my computer was behind a firewall, I'd be able to select this manual activation, and that would allow me to use a different process for activating. I'll click the Activate button, and in this case, since I've previously installed the enterprise trial, I'm getting an error, and it wants me to enter a valid license key. If you get into this situation, you can email the UiPath support team, and they can deactivate any previous registrations that would allow you to proceed. You won't see this if you're installing Community Edition for the first time. I'm going to go back and enter my trial license so we can proceed. After either approach, you should see a thank you page, something like this. So now we can close up the browser and start using UiPath by either clicking on the Open link to open an existing project or using any one of these tabs to create a new project. But we'll cover that in the next lectures. Actually, before I wrap up this video, I'd like to point out this Help tab over on the left side. When you click on that, you can see information about your current install, including when your Community Edition license will expire, your device ID, which can be selected and copied using Control-C in case you have to interact with support, and also this channel radio button. UiPath will automatically update you with new versions, and if you only want the most stable versions, leave this radio button selected. However, if you always want to try the latest and greatest features, go ahead and check this beta radio button, because then the latest beta versions will be automatically installed on your computer whenever you use UiPath. There's a lecture coming up that shows you how to renew your Community Edition license when it does expire. And just make note of the fact that there's an easy link to get to product documentation or the forum when you need to ask questions, because the UiPath technical support team doesn't officially support the Community Edition. Our goal when using UiPath is to automate processes against a wide variety of targets. When you first install UiPath, however, it doesn't automatically come with all of the activities you'll need to be able to build any kind of process. So to demonstrate how to add packages, make sure you're on the Start tab and click on this Process tile here to create a new blank project. By default, it wants you to save this in C, Users, your username, Documents, UiPath, which is fine. I tend to store my processes in C Development, UiPath, but you're free to put your processes wherever you want. I'll type in 2018.3-first project. Notice I didn't put any spaces in here. And just for the sake of time, I'll copy and paste that down here and click on create. Since I'm recording on a small screen, I'll free up some space by clicking on this to auto hide. And I can always come down here and click on output whenever I want to see that and increase or decrease the size using that. In older versions of UiPath, they used to put the package manager here in this little area, but now they've moved it up here so it's more visible. So I'm going to click on that Manage Packages button to install packages that will allow us to automate things like Excel or databases or web browsers and whatnot. I'll go into this All Packages area and click on Official. These are activity packages that are developed by UiPath. We also have several other feeds that have different packages that are developed by the community, Microsoft, and so on. And you can configure the feed address for any of these packages by going up to Settings and using these controls over here to modify these entries. So here on the Official tab, you can see, for instance, I can type in Excel and it shows us the official Excel activity package. If I click on that, we could select between different versions of the package, and this runtime rule dropdown, as you can see, specifies which version of the package to install at runtime. If I leave this at strict, that's going to force the UiPath platform to download this exact version of this activity when the robot runs. If I set it to lowest applicable version, it will be a little bit more flexible about which version it downloads. I'll leave this set to strict, and before I click install, notice there are several dependencies. So when I install this Excel activity, it's also going to download these other 5 activities which support the use of this Excel activity. So I'll click on install, and notice I've got this little clock here that says package to be installed. These won't install until I click the save button. So now I can blank out this search criteria, and as I grab this scroller and jump down to the bottom, you can see this is where all of those UiPath official activities live. So if you want the Python activities, for instance, just go ahead and click on that and click install. And notice it queues that one up for installation as well. Typically, you'll only install the activities that you know you'll need for the process you're developing. But for the sake of demos, I'm going to go ahead and install a lot of these. Like system, I'll click install. I don't have access to a mainframe right now, but I'm going to install the terminal activities anyway, so you can see what they look like. UI automation is very important, so I'll click on install for those. Web activities allows us to do things like API calls, so I'll install that. Word, of course, is for Microsoft Word. Mail is good for sending emails. OCR, those are great. FTP is good for sending and receiving files from FTP servers. We've already got Excel. Database is going to be good for connecting to a SQL database. I'll install that. Credentials is necessary for being able to store encrypted credentials. Cognitive has some cool stuff. The Twilio activity allows our robots to send text messages. That's kind of cool. So you can scroll through here and look at some of the other activities. And if anything looks good to you, go ahead and click on it and select the install button. And when you're done, click on save. And notice it says downloading dependencies while it pulls down all those activities from the official feed. Once that's done, you see we have a dependencies node that shows all the activities on which this project is presumably dependent. And there's our main.xaml file, which I'll talk about in future lectures. So remember to use your Manage Packages button to download any packages you know you're going to need for the given process you're developing. I'm going to give you a full interface tour in an upcoming video, but I wanted to first quickly show you the impact of what we just did in the previous video. In that previous video, we were dealing with the Project tab, and you recall that we went to the Manage Packages and installed a bunch of packages. I'll remind you again that that is not a one-time effort. In previous versions of UiPath, you would install all those packages one time, and you'd have access to all of those activities you installed in every new process you created. The downside to that is when you publish the process, you got all of those activities as dependencies for every process. And that impacted the startup time of the robot when it ran, because it would have to go out and download unnecessary activities that it didn't need. So as of version 2018.3, they now force you to install only the packages you need for any given robot at the time you create the project. So you can see that in this project tab, when we expand our dependencies, we have a lot of stuff. And we normally wouldn't have this many activities for most robots. If we switch over to the Activities tab, we'll see the impact of having installed all of those packages. I'll collapse favorites for now, and as we look at our available node, you see that we have things like UI automation, user events, app integration, system, programming, workflow, app scripting, orchestrator, and cognitive. Some of these things came with the default project. For instance, if I go and open up this project I created called Second Process, I have not added any activities to this process. So on my Activities tab, you see that I do have several of those nodes, but under App Integration, for instance, all I have are 3 activities: Excel, CSV, and Mail, the most common ones. Notice we don't see Cognitive in here or App Scripting, but when I go back to my Start menu and open that first project, our Activities tab has more nodes like App Scripting and Cognitive like I mentioned. In a future video, I'll be giving you a full tour of this UI, but bear in mind that video is from an older version of UiPath. Just remember that they did move the Manage Packages button out here, and there might be a few other minor changes. For now, let's take a peek at some of these activities that we installed. In UI automation, we can interact with elements or text, do some OCR stuff, interact with images, web browsers, or application windows. User events is all about using this monitor events activity to listen for key presses or things like that that might trigger actions in your robot. App integration, this is where we have our Excel and CSV, database, terminal, web, Word, mail, FTP, intelligent OCR. You can see this is kind of the bread and butter node that has lots of cool stuff to interact with any kind of target you want to. Under System, File, Clipboard, Application, Environment. Environment is where you'd get things like who is the current Windows user that's logged in. We can present dialogues. We can deal with Windows credentials. Under Programming, these are things like data structures, strings and collections and parsing XML, data tables. Under App Scripting, that's where we find our Python activity that we installed. That's good for invoking snippets of Python, especially all the new AI stuff like TensorFlow. Orchestrator, of course, allows us to interact with the Orchestrator server, which includes getting assets, which are simply configuration variables that have data that our robot needs to run. We can put items and get items from queues. We can invoke other jobs for other robots. And finally, in Cognitive, you've got a whole bunch of cool stuff where we integrate with Google, IBM Watson, Microsoft, and Stanford Natural Language Programming. I'm going to produce a course that's all about AI for RPA, and I'll be covering these things in that course. So I'll end this video here. Just bear in mind that you won't always have all of these activities in every robot. You're only going to use Manage Packages and install the activities that you need for the given process you're building. And those things will become dependencies of the project in this node right here. And this is just your main XAML file that provides this canvas where you drag and drop those activities to build up your process. One thing I usually do is double click on this menu up here at the top to give myself more vertical space. And I usually click on each of these tabs and unpin them so that they collapse along the side here. And that gives me more horizontal space as well. To access the menu, you can click on the menu and access any of those buttons. To access these guys, just click on the activities. You can search for what you want or expand and drag and drop. And when you go back and click on the canvas, it goes away. So like I said, the full UI tour is coming up. That was an older version of UiPath, but I'll update that when I have time. I'd like to cover one more setup nuance before we move along and do some work. Most of the time, you're probably going to be automating the Internet Explorer browser. And fortunately, UiPath supports that right out of the box. But in some cases, you're going to want to automate the Chrome browser because it makes certain tasks like downloading files easier than Internet Explorer. In previous versions of UiPath, they had a Setup tab up here near the top, and that's where we used to install the Chrome extension. Now we have to click on the Start menu here, and we see the Tools tab over here on the left. Notice this is where we can now install those various extensions. So when I click on the Chrome extension button, it's telling me now that UiPath Chrome extension has been installed for the current user. We just need to make sure that we can enable it in Chrome and then restart the browser. If I click OK on that and open up Chrome, notice it gives us this notification that UiPath Web Automation has been added. We simply need to click on Enable Extension, and now we see it appear up in the top toolbar area. When you click on it, you can remove it if you need to. This process can also be done via the command line. If you go to studio.uipath.com and you toggle over to the 18.3 version, and we scroll all the way down here, we eventually come across extensions, and when you click on this node, it walks you through the process. Notice that it can be done using the Studio installer, and this is for the enterprise version. You can actually select that as an option. We can do it from Studio like we just did, or we can go to the command prompt and we cd to this directory, C program files x86 UiPath Studio UiPath. And inside there's an application called setupextensions.exe. You'll simply run that and either pass it a flag of Chrome Global, which will install that extension for all the users, or just Chrome, which installs it per user. So let's take a look at how that works. I'm going to select this path and Control-C to copy. I'll type CMD in my start menu and open up a new command prompt. I'll paste that in and hit return. Interestingly, it's not finding that directory. So I did a quick search since that wasn't found, and it turns out where they're putting that now is in the C drive, in users, go into the current user, app data, local, then type UiPath, open that up, and go into app 1830, which is the current version that I've got installed. Double click on UiPath, and there's our setup extensions. So if I copy that and type cd space and then paste that in and hit return, now we're pointing at that directory, and we can run that setup extensions.exe and then put in a space /Chrome. And when you hit return, it'll do the same thing that we did with the UiPath Studio interface. So that's how you set up the Chrome extension, and now we should be able to create a process that automates Chrome.